across the pillow. Her beautiful straight nose was bent to one side by the adhesive holding the tube in her mouth. Deep in septic shock, with her organs failing, she resembled a large doll, her skin swollen and smooth and rubbery. Liquid purled along her arms and the backs of her hands, forced out through her skin as her kidneys failed and her cells wept. The shape of her hands, their curving thumbs slack now against the hospital sheet, was deeply familiar. I could picture those hands in motion, scrubbing a kitchen counter, bringing a cigarette to her red-slicked lips, slapping my face. I'd flown to Florida from my home in upstate New York for my sister and father, to be there with them while whatever was happening to my mother played itself out. That's what I told myself, anyway. I loved my father despite his willingness to give me up because my mother said so. I loved my sister despite her closeness with our mother. She and I had worked hard over the years to stay connected, and we held a deep affection for each other that bridged the family schism. A nurse glided through the glass doors, adjusting tubes and dials, checking vitals. She called my mother by name, asked her to open her eyes, and I backed away from the bed, my heart pounding. I did not want my mother to look at me. She couldn't speak, she was as close to death as a living person can get, but still I did not want to see what she thought of me, what she'd always thought of me, reflected in her deep-set blue eyes. I put myself in the far corner, in the only bit of shadow in that too-bright hospital room, and listened to my sister talk and cry and sing, trying to coax our mother back from wherever she had been carried. I knew my mother was dying, though no one said the word. I knew she was helpless and vulnerable, and still I felt afraid. My sister begged her for a sign, an acknowledgement that she was still fighting, even as I dreaded it. In life, our mother had been quick to judge, to criticize, to punish with her words. What terrible pronouncement might she deliver? What barbed look might she send my way, now that she had nothing else to lose? Even if I'd known for sure that she would say nothing, I would still have backed into the shadowy corner where she couldn't see me. I would still have felt my stomach drop and my heart stutter. I flew home the next morning. I wasn't there a few days later when my sister and father took her off life support and she died, or rather was finally allowed to be dead. By the time my sister sobbed her goodbyes, I was thousands of miles away. My husband and I had planned a family trip to Hawaii long before my mother complained of a pain in her belly and asked my father to drive her to the emergency room, before the curtains opened and then closed on this particular act of our family tragedy. I thought about canceling our trip and flying back to Florida for the funeral, but the truth was I didn't want to be there, and no one else wanted me there either. I thought I should want to be at the funeral, to say goodbye on all sorts of levels to my mother, who had, after all, been such a defining force in my life. But I didn't. I didn't want to sit through the service, dry-eyed, as my sister grieved and our father asked everyone in bewilderment how this could have happened. I didn't want to listen to the eulogies of praise and loss that would feel like they'd been written about someone else's mother. I didn't want to hear people talk about how happy-go-lucky and carefree and fun my mother was, the one who wasn't afraid to wear a silly costume or lead the conga line or play a practical joke. I'd been puzzling over that reflected version of her my whole life, a version I did not recognize and had never personally experienced. If I went to her funeral, all the old feelings would wash over me, and I would become once more, in my own eyes and everyone else's, the cold and withholding child who had destroyed my mother's life, whose story broke the family narrative, whose chest held a stone instead of a heart. So I went to Hawaii with my husband and 2 daughters and set out on the trail that morning. I felt little about my mother's death. After so many years of estrangement, maybe I was out of feelings. Or maybe not. The Lahaina-Pali Trail can be steep in spots, but that didn't explain why I couldn't catch my breath. And it didn't explain why great purple bruises, exotic blood flowers, bloomed suddenly on my legs from thighs to knees. I had to stop every 5 minutes, waving my husband and daughters ahead, to lean over and look out at the placid Malaya harbor as my